All right, so Tyson is being boycotted on the belief that they are planning on hiring 52,000 immigrant workers and firing Americans. Now, that story is total bullshit, as I'm about to demonstrate. However, that doesn't mean you should not boycott Tyson, and we'll get into why. All right, so I traced all this back, and it seems that this misperception started with this Bloomberg article, which actually is not badly reported. They just distorted what was said in it. So Tyson is hiring New York immigrants for jobs no one else wants. So let's see what it actually says. For politicians in Washington and New York City, an unprecedented stream of asylum seekers presents an intractable problem with no easy answers. For companies like Tyson Foods, Inc., struggling to fill unpleasant jobs with a U.S. unemployment rate of 3.9%, this new population presents an alluring opportunity. Tyson is joining the nonprofit Tent Partnership for Refugees, which was founded by Chobani yogurt magnate Yamdi Ulokaya. That's the best I'm doing with that. With a plan to hire some of the 181,400 migrants that have come through New York City's intake system over the past 2 years. The meatpacker already employs about 42,000 immigrants among its 120,000 strong U.S. workforce. Okay, now remember that number. So about a third of their workforce is immigrant labor already. Not illegal immigrant labor, mind you. Immigrant labor. We would like to employ another 42,000 if we could find them, said Garrett Dolan, who is going to be fired because of this boycott for the things he said in this article, who leads Tyson's efforts to eliminate employment barriers such as immigration status or the need for childcare. On a cold day last month, Tyson officials met with immigrants at Chobani's offices in Manhattan and hired 17 asylum seekers from Venezuela, Mexico, and Colombia for jobs at its plant in Humboldt, Tennessee. Last week, it hired 70 more. Okay, so that's, Keaton, I'm not a mathematician, but that sounds like 87 people in a workforce of 120,000. Am I right?
Yes.
Am I right? Okay, I got that right. It doesn't sound like 52,000 immigrants. All right. Tyson is constantly in search of workers to fill jobs in its factories. Tasks like washing meat, placing the cuts into trays, and doing a final inspection for bones. Dolan says the company expects about 40% of the 100,000 people in these roles will leave each year. A statistic, he says, is standard across the meatpacking industry. To meet this need, he said, Tyson plans to hire about 52,000 people at that wage class, which starts at $16.50 an hour plus benefits in 2024 alone. All right, so you see where the confusion comes from. He's talking about replacement level hiring because of the enormous turnover in the industry. He's not talking about bringing in people to replace jobs. He's talking about replacing all the people who quit because, surprise, people don't usually like working in a meat packing plant. And if they can get paid, $16.50 an hour delivering a fucking pizza, they're going to deliver the pizza.
Yeah, no. I worked in a warehouse. Warehouse work is very high turnover work because it's backbreaking work for pretty low pay. And I actually left UPS to drive food, basically.
Right,
yeah.
right.
And that's UPS. That's not decapitating dead chickens and ripping the feathers off
for
of dead birds.
$16.50 an hour.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
This isn't like you're getting paid $50 an hour to do that.
Right.
We're recognizing there's not a lot of people that are going to be working labor manufacturing jobs that are American, Dolan said. A large portion of new hires are going to come from refugees and immigrants, so we're in the business of strategically thinking that through. Tyson is also investing in retaining immigrant workers, having earmarked $1.5 million a year for legal aid services in 2023 and 2024, and providing paid time off for workers to attend court hearings. Last year, Tyson paid for 1,317 workers to become U.S. citizens. The migrant hires and other new entry-level workers receive on-site childcare and transportation, as well as English classes for those who want them. The company is providing its new employees from New York with temporary housing, a relocation stipend, and paid time off to better acclimate to their new lives in Humboldt. They're very, very loyal, Dolan said. They've been uprooted, and what they want is stability. What they want is a sense of belonging. Okay, so a lot of this last part, I think, is what set off a lot of right-wingers who, interestingly, tend to be rabid capitalists who you would think would understand why a business that can't fill these jobs would go out of their way to accommodate workers who might actually keep the job for more than 3 months, unlike your typical American worker.
Right.
People who look at this, if you understand anything about what kind of work is being offered for what wage, it reminds me of Life of Brian, where the jailer spits in his face and the guy crucified says, "You lucky bastard! I lay awake night dreaming of being spat at in the face." Oh, yeah, no, these people got cushy jobs here at the meatpacking plant. Okay, so how did this blow up into a big thing? Well, of course, the Twitters, the X's got a hold of it, and wokeness posted, Tyson is closing its facility in Perry, Iowa, and laying off its 1,200 workers. Instead, they plan to hire thousands of new illegals in states like New York. Yeah, good luck opening a Tyson plant and getting it fucking staffed in New York. We don't have Tyson plants in New York. But they just ran with this because the timing, coincidentally, right when this article came out, a plant in Iowa was getting closed. So the media, the social media got a hold of it and put the two together. Oh, they're firing them to hire migrants from New York, which of course wasn't the case. So we need to bankrupt illegal immigrant magnate Tyson Foods. If your blood isn't boiling after watching this clip from Jesse Waters, you don't have a pulse. All right, so professionally aggrieved white man Jesse Waters ran with the ball, even though Fox News itself had run a story that day debunking this story. That didn't stop him from going on that night with this.
Be permanently closing its pork factory in Perry, killing around for the better. This week, Tyson Foods announced that it will be permanently closing its pork factory in Perry, killing around 1,200 jobs in a town of just 8,000 people. So as Perry residents struggle to cope with mass layoffs, Tyson Foods has its eyes on a different class of workers. The company is now offering new jobs to asylum seekers in other states like New York. Bloomberg says Tyson's tracking migrants in a massive database. They scroll through the data like Facebook. You see a worker you like, tap, hire. They even had a job fair.
So you were at a Tyson fair in New York City not so long ago where Tyson was basically making this pitch. What did you observe when you went there?
They created a database for these new asylum seekers in New York City. So these people would come in, they'd learn a little bit about the company, and for the most part, Tyson had already gone through their various details of their application. And so many of them, 17 the day I was there, and then another 70 a couple weeks later, went off to Tennessee to go start their new jobs as Tyson production workers.
Oh, and the jobs come with perks. Not just health insurance. Tyson's also offering lawyers to its illegal alien workers.
Yeah, okay. So that was basically what we read before. So with that, this really caught fire. Oh, we're gonna Bud Light them and all that fucking shit. So Tyson felt a need to put out a statement, of course, before they get the full Target Bud Light treatment. In recent days, there has been a lot of misinformation in the media about our company, and we feel compelled to set the record straight. Any insinuation that we would cut American jobs to hire immigrant workers is completely false. Tyson Foods is strongly opposed to illegal immigration, and we led the way in participating in the two major government programs to help employers combat unlawful employment, E-Verify, and the mutual agreement between government and employees, IMAGE program. Since being founded in 1935 in Arkansas, Tyson Foods has created jobs and employed millions of people in states all across America, the majority of whom are American citizens, which is technically true, according to the stats. Today, Tyson Foods employs 120,000 team members in the United States, all of whom are required to be legally authorized to work in this country. We have a history of strong hiring practices, and anybody who is legally able is welcome to apply to open job listings. Now, listen, you're going to see where this piece goes. I'm not defending Tyson, but you're going after him for the wrong things. I'm sure this is true, that they don't have to hire illegal immigrants. They have enough people with refugee and asylum status.
Well, Jesse Waters very sneakily mentioned they're hiring people seeking asylum. Well, you have the right to seek asylum. Now, if you wanted to change that, you would need to change that through the law, right? That's something you would actually need a bill to fix if you didn't want to grant people those kinds of rights. But as of right now, people have the right to seek asylum here, and that, if I had to guess, was what those lawyers were for that Waters mentioned here. They'll help you with lawyers. Well, that's lawyers to get your asylum process.
And that is a specific legal category. Refugee and asylum seekers, they get work permits.
Right.
If you apply for asylum within 180 days, usually you'll get a work permit. That's who they're hiring to clean up cow carcasses for $16.50 an hour. All right. I don't think there are a lot of Americans out there who feel like they're missing out on these jobs. Let's get real. There are certain industries where you could say an American would be happy to do it at a better wage. This is really not one of those industries. Tyson Foods isn't hiring workers who came to the U.S. illegally. Boycott calls persist. So this is from the AP. Tyson told the Associated Press it has between 5 and 8% of roles open in its 500 U.S. locations at any given time, all of which are available to anyone who is qualified and legally authorized to work in the United States. Now, let me just say, we have a very viewpoint diverse audience. Some people might take exception to the pushback on this. Do you honestly believe that if a qualified American shows up who wants to fucking cut up meat for a living, they don't get the job? That they say, oh, no, let me hire the person from Venezuela?
They take anybody. These warehouses overhire constantly. When I worked UPS, they overhired. It was like the old days down at the docks, right, where the guys would come in.
The shape-up system.
Yeah, right. Half of them would get turned away because there wasn't work for them. That's what they do. They overhire because they know that so many people are going to quit within a week because they're not going to be able to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The company's U.S. workforce comprises approximately 120,000 employees, according to Tyson. That means that it currently has roughly between 6,000 and 9,600 open positions. In 2022, Tyson committed to hiring 2,500 refugees in the U.S. over 3 years as a member of the Tent Partnership for Refugees, a network of more than 400 major multinational companies. Refugees, people who face persecution and were granted entry to the U.S. while living outside the country, are legally authorized to work as soon as they arrive in the U.S. Garrett Dolan, Associate Director of Human Resources at Tyson, said in the Bloomberg article that the company plans to hire 52,000 people for factory jobs in 2024. According to Tyson, Dolan misspoke. Now, this is what I think, and I'm surprised because I looked at quite a few of the fact-checking articles on this to make sure we got it right. I'm surprised none of the other articles seem to have caught this. I don't think he misspoke. I think he was talking about replacement level. And I think Tyson is panicking now and just saying, no, he misspoke. But I think he probably didn't, but I think it was misconstrued. Bloomberg told the AP that it stands by its reporting, and that's why. Like Bloomberg, they're as corporate media goes, they're pretty good, and they'd be pulling it down if any of this didn't check. Although Tyson declined to comment when asked how many of the Perry plant workers are non-citizens, it said in a statement that any insinuation that we would cut American jobs to hire immigrant workers is completely false. The company also noted that it has encouraged the Perry employees to apply for other positions at Tyson. Some social media allege that following the Perry closure, Tyson will be hiring in New York, where there has been a massive influx of migrants. However, Tyson said that it, quote, does not operate in New York, nor does it have any plans to do so. Why would they? I mean, it's one of the highest tax states in the country. They specialize in setting up plants in states where they're going to get sweetheart deals on corporate tax breaks from the state that's desperate to get the plant in there. That's where all the Tyson plants are. States with right to work, very weak unions. They're not coming to New York. But what's really fucking crazy about this story is the meatpacking industry has been notorious for exploiting immigrant labor since Upton Sinclair wrote The Jungle. I mean, people have known about this for over 100 fucking years. So why do they want these immigrants? Because the immigrants are going to be living high on the hog, so to speak? No, because it's a fucking horrible job, and they want people who can't afford to complain. Meatpacking plants have long relied on immigrant labor. Now some are turning to foreign visa workers. So aside from this article is about how they started bringing in immigrant workers on visas because, for one, they can't fill the jobs, and for another, they're easy to exploit. Industry experts said foreign workers whose time in the States is tied to the employer sponsoring their visas and generally aren't members of plants' unions are probably less likely to speak out about working conditions in an industry where lacerations and amputations are common. Plants need to employ a lot of people, and you have to push them as hard as possible, said Joshua Specht, a professor at the University of Notre Dame who has studied the meat industry. The best way to do that, obviously, is to focus on employing people who are rather marginal and who are willing to put up with being overworked. Initially, meatpacking plants were built in populated cities, giving workers an opportunity to protect themselves by creating unions, he said. However, after World War II, new meatpacking companies began to migrate to rural areas and did not continue to use a traditional union workforce. With the move to rural areas, plants sought a workforce that was willing to work cheaply and live away from city amenities, according to a U.S. Department of Agriculture study. They turned to Latin American immigrants and more recently African refugees. In 2015, about a quarter of all meat and poultry workers were foreign-born non-citizens, according to the GAO report. The numerous languages spoken at a plant attest to its diverse workforce. One South Dakota plant employs a workforce where about 40 languages are spoken, according to a CDC and Control and Prevention report. But the many languages can also foster an inability for workers to protect themselves, Specht said. It's not just an issue between English and Spanish, he said. It's also the fact that in some of these facilities, you might have a dozen different languages being spoken. Workers can't talk to each other or organize particularly effectively or even advocate for themselves. Okay, so this is not a new thing that just came out. Tyson hiring 87 immigrants. According to this is from 2021, 25% of the industry are immigrants. So you have anything, Keaton?
No, go ahead.
All right, so this is how far back awareness of this goes. This is a classic, The Jungle. Now, Upton Sinclair was basically a muckraking journalist and a dedicated socialist. He went undercover into the notorious Chicago stockyards at the turn of the century, spent 7 weeks just observing the conditions there. Now, his hope was that the jungle was going to shock the conscience of the nation as to the horrors of capitalism, the way that Uncle Tom's Cabin had shocked its conscience regarding slavery. Didn't work out that way. What actually happened is they created the FDA because his descriptions of blood on the walls and rat feces in the meat horrified Americans about the food they were consuming. Didn't do anything for the workers. So this was actually, there's a book from 1906. His book about meat packing was actually about immigrant labor abuse. Just as the jungle accidentally caused a nationwide furor over the meatpacking industry, Sinclair may have accidentally produced a lasting portrait of immigrant exploitation. He was aiming to describe every worker's struggle, but he most squarely hit upon the immigrant worker's experience. A key difference, though, is that the meat graft was addressed with reforms that are still in place today. In 1906, the Pure Food and Drug Act established the Bureau of Chemistry, which would become the FDA in 1930, and the Federal Meat Inspection Act tasked the U.S. Department of Agriculture with monitoring meatpacking plants, a task for which it is still responsible. The same commitment to reform has not been applied to immigrant workers. So listen, I said at the top, I'm not saying we shouldn't boycott Tyson. But if we're going to boycott Tyson, let's boycott them for the child labor, which I just want to point out. This story broke in September, and I didn't see calls for a boycott. It's pretty funny. They hire 87 immigrants, and the internet explodes with calls for a boycott. They get exposed hiring children to clean up their plants, and I don't know. I didn't hear anything about a boycott.
Well, these Republican state houses are all about, increasing child labor, lowering the age at which kids can start working. So that's not surprising to me.
Well, it builds character. Just don't climb into the gears.
Yeah, right.
You'll be
exactly.
fine. Yeah. So Tyson and Purdue are facing child labor investigations. Tyson Foods and Purdue Farms, which together produce a third of the poultry sold in the United States, are under federal investigation into whether they relied on migrant children to clean slaughterhouses, some of the most dangerous work in the country. The Labor Department opened the inquiries after an article in the New York Times Magazine published this past week found migrant children working overnight shifts for contractors in the company's plants on the eastern shore of Virginia. Children as young as 13 were using acid and pressure hoses to scour blood, grease, and feathers from industrial machines. Meat processing is among the nation's most hazardous industries, and federal law bans minors from working in slaughterhouses because of the high risk of injury. The Times article focused on one child, Marcos Cux, whose arm was mangled in a conveyor belt last year as he sanitized a deboning area in the Purdue plant. He was in the 8th grade. The Labor Department has also opened investigations into the companies that have been running the cleaning shifts for Purdue and Tyson in Virginia, Lafayette Industrial, which works with Purdue, and QSI, which works with Tyson and is part of a conglomerate, the Vincent Group. Fayette hired Marcos at age 13 after he arrived in Virginia from his village in Guatemala. In February last year, he was cleaning deep inside a conveyor belt at the Purdue plant when it suddenly came to life and pulled him across the floor, tearing open his arm. He underwent 3 surgeries, but his arm remained limp at his side, his hand frozen in a claw. He is one of thousands of Mexican and Central American children who have come to the United States alone since 2021 and ended up in dangerous, grueling jobs. The Times has reported in a series of articles this year. And so finally, just the headline here. So if that's not enough to make you boycott Tyson, which I fully support for the right reasons, this is just last month, February 14th, Tyson, for a Valentine for its shareholders, rejected a call for an audit into child labor allegations. And according to activists who were there, they had a 20-minute shareholder meeting, didn't take any questions, and shut the effort to audit them down. So yeah, these companies are horrible. They're horrible, and they do exploit immigrant labor. But it's not a matter of they're hiring these immigrants to replace Americans who really don't want these jobs anyway. But sure, I mean, if you did have a rush of Americans, would they prefer immigrants? Probably. But that's not the issue here. The issue is they want these immigrants so that they can exploit them. And you're talking about a company so evil that is willing to put children in its plants. And in spite of their protestations, we didn't know anything about it. Well, if you didn't know anything about it, why aren't you willing to do an audit?
Yeah, and when it comes to this industry, like I said, there's such high turnover. It becomes an issue of, do you have enough people around you who you can get in the door and then out the door when they inevitably decide they can't do it, in a few weeks. Right. I mean, that's how UPS worked, and this is obviously even harder and even tougher. Right. And so that's one issue. Now, in terms of the immigration issue, like on a whole, you've heard people make the argument that our birth rates are declining, which means there is an argument to be made for increased immigration. Now, that doesn't mean an open border. That doesn't mean chaos at the border where some people come in
Sure.
under the fence, because then that leads them more vulnerable to being exploited by dishonest companies, and that shortchanges American workers, right? So, but there is an argument to be made for increased legal flow of people from, south of the border up to here, just because of a demand, right? There is a population flow that you could argue is necessary. Now, I'm not equipped to make that argument. I'm not equipped to try and argue that that's wrong. I have not studied this issue that closely, partly because I think if you are concerned about people making the journey from south to north, you have to stop sanctioning South American countries. You have to stop overthrowing their governments when they elect people who don't want their countries to basically be plantations for us, right? So, to me, the immigration issue is downstream of the larger question: why are they desperate? Why are they fleeing? Why are they coming here in the first place? If you really want to solve that, you have to look at that end of it. So once they get here, what to do? I can't claim I'm an expert on that, but I can say that, yes, because our birth rates are going down, people make the argument you actually do need more people, and a lot of these companies say they need more people. That's what this is. This is about a shortage of people. They just need people, right? And so, yeah, they'll take people from wherever they come.
This is an industry that has always relied on desperate people. And that is why it has traditionally been an industry that employs a lot of immigrants who arrive in the country without a lot of options. This is nothing new. This is going on for over 100 years. Now, I've said on the show, I do not believe we can't secure the border. Do I believe that they have their own reasons for wanting to allow floods of people to come over the border? And do I think it's a coincidence that happened at the same time that workers, for the first time in decades, started to unionize and get some leverage against these companies to force higher wages? No, I don't. But you can't just have a knee-jerk reaction to every story about an immigrant getting a job, because particularly as I hope was demonstrated in this segment, especially in this industry, the story is a lot more complicated than that. And hating the immigrant, hating the person who's working for shit wages, doing a job that you probably don't want to do, that's exactly what they want. They want us all hating each other and fighting each other.
Please clap.